Instagram. So today we are at our last day of the Sacred Mother series, and I am so excited for today's topic. So today we are leaving the comfortable light side of the mother archetype, and we are diving deep into the shadows of the devouring mother. So I'm really excited to talk about it because there are just so many facets of motherhood and so many facets of experiencing the archetype of mother that sometimes they get lost because we don't want to talk about them, right? It's like, this was painful, this didn't work, this was terrible, and so we don't want to talk about it. But that's when it gets stuck in the shadows and we can't to use it as that transformative energy, use it as that alchemy, right? We have to alchemize this energy. So we talked about already the nurturing mother. We talked about the protector mother. Tomorrow we talk about transformational, but today we're talking about the devouring mother. Who is the devouring mother? She is the shadow side of the nurturer. So she is the mother who gives too much and forgets to let go. So remember, even the nurturer had her shadow side where it started to be really controlling and self-sacrificing into this territory of victimhood or martyrdom. So now we come into that devouring mother. She is the one who consumes rather than nourishes, who merges her identities with her children and overprotects and holds on too tightly. This is where things like codependency come in, enmeshment and things like that. So her care becomes control and her love becomes entanglement. At her core, she fears the most being abandoned, irrelevant, and unneeded. So, what I want to talk about with this devouring mother is I'm not here to say, oh, look at this terrible mother, right? I'm here to say there are reasons that this comes up. There are core woundings that have happened that need to be healed. This is where that generational trauma is handed down, right? So she's afraid of being abandoned, irrelevant, or unneeded. So she holds too closely. Whether this is consciously or not, she might not realize it because she can be doing it out of anxiety, loneliness, or just general conditioning, because that's what I was talking about with that ancestral trauma coming down, because that's all she knows of motherhood, right? But make no mistake, she is not evil. She is not a villain. I wrote that down there because I'm like, I want you to know that she is a woman who has once denied her own individuation and is unconsciously repeating the cycle. So, what are some of these traits and behaviors of the devouring mother? So, we talked about emotional enmeshment. So, what does this look like? This looks like your pain is my pain. You exist to fulfill my unmet needs. These are the mothers who are living vicariously through their children, right? This is over identification with the child, the partners, the roles. This is the part of the devouring mother that says, without you, I don't exist, right? Because again, that's that desire to be needed and to be wanted. This is also overstepping of boundaries. So is some of the behaviors of the devouring mother. So she comes in and she says, I know what's best for you. You don't know what's best for you. That's going to be the devouring mother. Also, guilt-based bonding. This is where you're going to hear things like, after all I've done for you, I can't believe that you wouldn't do XYZ or be XYZ, that kind of a thing. So it's sort of this covert control disguised as nurturing. So her presence can be very seductive because it does seem very nurturing and she appears very loving, but the love in the end feels very heavy, feels tethered, feels conditional. So when I was doing the research on the devouring mother, I wanted to know about what would lead a woman to become this devouring mother archetype. And now remember, we can all embody all of the archetypes, right? We can all be a nurturer, a protector, a devouring mother. We can all be a transformational mother and all have these different qualities that ebb and flow within us depending on where we are in our cycle, right? We are very dynamic creatures. But what might lead to a woman becoming this devouring mother? Unhealed trauma and her own abandonment wounds would definitely lead to something like this. So a fear of being left, a fear of being forgotten or replaced. Remember that identity is wrapped in being the mother. Without you, I'm nothing, right? Loss of identity outside of motherhood or caretaking. In my workshops, I teach about Dharma and our purpose and how a lot of times we attach our purpose to a role that we're inhabiting, especially motherhood. But then when those children fly the nest and we are still here, then what is our purpose, right? So we need to remember that our purpose is who we are when we show up to do whatever it is that we're doing, right? Another way that these women become devouring mothers is cultural reinforcement. So this idealizes the martyrdom and this over sacrifice of mothers. So, oh, she's such a good mother. She lives for her children. She sacrifices everything for her family and for her children. And while that can sound noble, if it's at the cost of her own nervous system, the cost of her own joy and happiness, what is she really providing, right? So we need to take back that sovereignty and take back our own and be that nurturing mother who fills her own cup and fills her fire, feeds her fire so that she can be the warmth for others. And then generational conditioning. So from being raised by mothers who also overstepped and clung too tightly, right? So then that's what you know of motherhood. This is how I should be. And you just don't know different. So in many cases, she was once a daughter who was not allowed to grow or express herself fully or freely. So this might be a woman who, had dreams, had aspirations, and they were shot down. Nope, that's not what you're going to be, right? And that can be where those kind of behaviors would come in. So when we're talking about the devouring mother, not just what her aspects are like, but what is it like to be raised by a devouring mother? So let's say you aren't a mother yourself right now, like to actual children, right? Or human children. Then we need to relate this to, okay, so what does this energy feel like if I was raised by a devouring mother? You might have confusion about where you and where she begins, where you end and where she begins. So there's such an enmeshment, and the personalities are so interwoven that it's hard to find your own identity separate from the mother. So and then when you do find that identity and you are working towards that sovereignty, there can be this guilt for wanting that independence, or this guilt of feeling like, oh my gosh, I've just totally ripped her, I broke her heart, that kind of a thing. Or there can be a fear of disappointing others, especially women. So if you have this need to please other women, or be a people pleaser, making sure that these women are liking you and you're feeling included. I mean, yes, it feels really good to be included. We all do. We all want to be included. But this is when it goes into that people-pleasing realm and that self-sacrifice. So there's this pattern of self-abandonment in relationships. I'm here, I live to serve, right? And so instead of taking that sovereignty. And then also, so if you were raised by devouring mothers, what we're talking about if you're just joining us. So emotional suppression to avoid hurting the feelings of or hurting her feelings. So not speaking your truth, not setting those boundaries because you're like, I don't want to hurt her feelings. You can see the hurt that has come and why she might be where she is, and you don't want to hurt her feelings, right? So then you kind of stifle your own voice because you're like, if I said the truth, it would break her, So you finding your voice can be very difficult. And then there's also this interesting one of a constant sense of being watched, evaluated, or required to perform. This is where your worthiness gets wrapped in and you're up in your performance. Like, who am I if I'm not performing, if I'm not creating and building and those things? Who am I if I am just being, right? And often these daughters and even sons of these devouring mothers grow up feeling deeply loved, but never fully free, right? So when they step into their sovereignty, that's when, whoop, those conditions pull. The cord is pulled. So how do we recognize, if we have been raised by this devouring mother, how do we recognize these patterns in ourselves so that we can stop that ancestral trauma from coming down? So this archetype lives on all of us, right? It's not about shame, it's about awareness. And that's what all of Moxie is all about, is Svedjaya, that self-study, that self-awareness. What are my intentions? How am I living intentionally? So you might be unconsciously embodying this devouring mother when you feel deep anxiety when a loved one pulls away or needs space. Someone might need space just for their own thing. This could be a loved one, it could be a friend, a family member, and if they're going through their own thing. Remember the 4 agreements, don't take anything personally. But when that happens, that space happens, and there's maybe been time between talking to a friend or a loved one, and anxiety starts coming in, right? Or you expect others to meet your emotional needs without asking directly. Nobody is a mind reader. Nobody knows what's going on in your own internal world. If you have unmet needs, we need to voice them, right? We need to set those boundaries. We need to say, this is what I need, right? Or you feel resentful when your care isn't returned the way that you imagine. So you're giving with conditions, right? So if you're giving and there's this care happening and it's not reciprocated, there can be resentment that comes up. You think, if I don't do it, no one else will. I slip into this one. I'm managing 2 soccer teams right now because of that, right? And then I feel exhausted and bitter, right? If I don't do it, no one else will. That's one that comes up. And you defined your worth by how needed you are. I had an experience, so some of these come up for me, and being vulnerable here and admitting that. I went on a retreat earlier this year that was for myself, and I was not facilitating in any capacity. And that was the first time. And I came so unglued by not being needed and by just receiving. I mean, I'm talking tears. I'm talking, what do I do with myself? And it was such a beautiful moment to stop and go, wow, look at how I'm reacting when I'm not needed. It's okay to be not needed. It's okay to sit and just be and receive, right? So let's bring this all back around. When we're talking about this devouring mother, what's on the other side? What is the deeper invitation of this devouring mother? So she is not here to be feared. She is not here to be shamed, pushed away. She is here to initiate. She is here to bring about these questions, this self-reflection. She shows up when we are being called to heal our enmeshment, to reclaim our sovereignty, and to mother ourselves, right? When integrated, her shadow truly, truly becomes a gift. So from control, we move into that conscious connection with her, with ourselves, with others. From overgiving, we move into sacred reciprocity, right? We show up in the spaces where we are reciprocated, or we give and without condition. We lovingly give, right? And we move from fear of loss to an honoring of individuation. So first there's this fear of the separation, this fear of of releasing that enmeshment, and then there's this honoring of the individuation. This is her, this is me. So she becomes, from the shadow aspect, this weaver of sovereignty. She's helping us to find the courage to disentangle from old patterns, our own old patterns. I went on that retreat. I did not know. I unconsciously had this pattern of, I must be needed. I must be providing, or why am I here? Right? I'm telling you, it was very uncomfortable. And I'm so glad, right, that I was able to see that. And so healing these old patterns, healing the codependent dynamics, and helping us to step into our full authentic selfhood. Because what's required to disentangle from that devouring mother is our full authentic selves, and being aware of that and being rooted in that. So the devouring mother whispers, you are allowed to be whole without needing to be needed, right? You are allowed to release the roles that cost you your truth. You are allowed to stand alone and still be deeply, deeply loved. So how interesting that we can take something that was so shadowy and something so misunderstood and turn it into this beautiful alchemy of sovereignty. And so that was really the inspiration behind my pieces for the Devouring Mother, is pieces that really represent this sovereignty. So I'll reveal the bracelet first. So the bracelet has this black tourmaline, hematite, garnet, obsidian, citrine, labradorite, and then we go back into that garnet. So what I did was I used these stones. I also used fluorite and a couple of the other pieces here too. To really represent that sovereignty and standing in your own, removing that negative energy, and also finding your light, finding your intuition, that transformation that comes with that labradorite. The garnet steps in and creates a really strong foundation for you to stand on, and then re-energizes all 7 chakras. When we've experienced the trauma of a devouring mother, some of our chakras, our heart, our confidence, our throat, can really shut down. And so garnet comes in, lays the foundation, and reignites everything. I love garnet. And then I did a little sovereignty amplifier. So we have the bracelet, which is a little bit bigger, not in size, but in beads. And then this here. And then I'm going to do the mala, because the necklaces that I made are like showstoppers. I love it. I love the mala too. So the mala has all those same beads. And then it also has the fluorite. And it's got citrine, black tourmaline, and the labradorite as those nuggets at the bottom there, right? So this piece is a beautiful, if you are really working on that becoming disentangled, letting go of that enmeshment, finding your sovereignty. This is a really powerful piece. Now, the necklaces, I made one without the pendant. So that's this one. I just love the textures and the beads and everything. And it's going to sit, I'll show you where it sits. It's going to sit just below the collarbone. My hair down and dangly earrings. So just right about here. And it's got that black tourmaline and the garnet. Now, this piece, so we had the bear, the mama bear, yesterday for the protector. But today we have the snake. So it's the shedding of our skin, the releasing, the transformation, and coming into the newer version of ourselves and stepping into our sovereignty. This is going to be that same length and just have the snake hanging down. This is a hand-carved snake out of reclaimed wood from an old musical instrument. So this is an artist that I found on Etsy, and I've been buying from him for years. So if you've seen the elephant or the ohms or anything like that, that's his art that I've added to mine. So these are the pieces of the Devouring Mother, finding your sovereignty. Today was very passionate for me, and I was very excited to share about the different aspects of the Devouring Mother and how we can change our perspective of it and our experiences with our own sovereignty. So thank you for being here. I'm loving this journey of motherhood and the divine mothers and archetypes. So I will see you tomorrow. Well, one more thing, we are going to go live at noon tomorrow because it's Sunday. And I decided so. I was like, why am I getting up at 8 on a Sunday? It's going to be at noon. So I will see you tomorrow to talk about the transformational mother. This is where we get into a little bit of those higher realms and we talk about the influences of mother energy as a whole and her transformational powers. Thanks for being here. Appreciate you so much. Bye.